Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
On today's Your Take, I'm joined by a gifted singer-songwriter and a multi-instrumentalist. My guest has a fascinating and varied history with music, musical education, learning piano from the age of 5, and performing at local nursing homes and in school bands and orchestras. She met her future husband at music college and went on to collaborate with him. She's released 3 solo albums: The Brooklyn Night, Wonder Wheel, and A Waltz Before I Go. Tours her music around the United States and has performed in England, Germany, Holland, Italy, Belgium, France, Ireland, Switzerland, and Japan. She was part of a popular all-female Led Zeppelin tribute band, Lez Zeppelin, whose self-titled debut album was produced by Eddie Kramer, who has worked with Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, David Bowie, the Rolling Stones, and of course, Led Zeppelin. My guest runs her own musical licensing company, has composed for stage and screen, and has an hilarious musical comedy act with her sister called the Vickie and Nickie Show. Today, I'm joined by Lisa Brigantino. We discuss Lisa's love of music and playing instruments from a young age, her musical education and tutorage, her recordings, and performing on the live scene, and future musical ambitions. Good afternoon, a very warm welcome. Thank you kindly for joining me today on Your Take.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me.
A lot to discuss about your musical journey and your passion for music and playing from a very young age. But can we go back to the very roots? You were raised in the small hamlet of Katona, north of New York City. What are your memories from your childhood, and do you have any siblings?
Yeah, well, yes, I grew up north of New York in Katona, and I have one sibling, my sister Lori, and we come from a very musical family on my mother's side. So there was always music in the house. When the extended family got together and sang happy birthday, there would be 4-part harmony. My cousin Felix Papalardi, who produced Cream and was in Mountain, and also produced many other musical acts in the 60s and 70s. It's my first cousin once removed on my mother's side, and other relatives are in the business. Michael Barbiero, my cousin Michael, is a engineer, a remixer, producer who's worked with everyone from Madonna to Government Mule. So there's this the musical gene runs through the family. So we were making music at a very young age. Playing ukulele. My grandmother taught my sister and I to play ukuleles when we were, like 4 years old. And then I started piano lessons at 5 and a violin at 7 and, playing in school and sang in the school choirs and choruses and, added other instruments as I went along.
From musical beginnings, and you've mentioned about music being in the genes and playing from such a young age, I wanted to move on to your schooling and ask where you were schooled and what are your memories from your time there? And were there any subjects that you were particularly interested in, and was music part of the school syllabus?
Yes, it was. I went to school in what's called the Katona-Lewisboro School District of Westchester County in New York, again, about 60 miles north of New York City. And we had a very good music program, even in elementary school. A band, orchestra, chorus. We had wonderful teachers. So even, at a young age in elementary school, I was playing in orchestra at, 7, 8 years old, singing in the school choir. Um, uh, just kind of really becoming involved in music at an early age. And that continued into high school, playing in the orchestra, singing in the choir, playing bass in the jazz band, the high school jazz band. So the music in schools at that time in the United States was really a large part of the school budgets, and that's not quite the case anymore. So I think I was just very fortunate to come up at that time, because it was just partaking in that constantly. It was just like, well, this is what I do. It's a way of life.
I want to pick up on your musical training and your education. And you've already spoken about learning music from such a young age. As early as 5, you were learning to play the piano. Can you recall that early musical tutorage and your music teacher from that time?
Oh, absolutely. My first piano teacher was Mrs. Young, who was the mother of a classmate of mine. And like a lot of the area kids went to her for piano lessons. So she was my first foray into having a piano teacher. And I studied with her for maybe 5 or 6 years, and then I went on to another teacher. But I remember those lessons, sitting next to her and starting to learn to read music and to play. But I had even at a young age, I had a really strong ear where I could hear something. I'd hear something on the radio and I'd play it back, and that was before I was even reading music. So that sometimes was disconcerting to her, because she was trying to teach me to read, and I was doing fine with that, but I think she didn't quite know what to do with me in terms of, being able to hear something and play it back, and how that all worked into who I was musically. At that time, I think I probably freaked her out a little bit. So,
Lisa, you went on to learn and play the violin, and your early musical experiences included singing at local nursing homes, performing in school bands, orchestras, and choral groups. What do you think you learned musically during this period? And what made you decide to compose and write your own songs?
well, I think one of the things that was important with being involved in a lot of those different school music groups, and then also being in bands like rock bands in high school, is that I was exposed to a variety of musical genres. So I was singing choral music. I was playing in the orchestra. So, we were playing the Bach-Brandenburg concertos when I was in 6th and 7th grade. Playing in the jazz band in high school. Also, I played percussion in high school, so I would play in the concert band too. So I had a really wide variety of musical influences and an interest in the different genres of music, and I still do to this day. And I think that's really informed me as a writer and a composer. And I think a lot of people kind of dabble when you've got such an interest in such a variety of music. You get this kind of bug that you want to take a crack at it. You want to create your own. You start having ideas about, well, what if I did this, or what if I did that? And so, I started songwriting at like 12 or 13, and then, continued to do that through high school, and of course into college, where I studied composition, and I really, got into the nuts and bolts of the theory, which really was very fascinating to me.
Exposed to different forms of music and playing that music as well. And you've also spoken about musical education, which taps in nicely to the next chapter, where we discuss your musical education, where you earned a Bachelor of Arts degree and a Master's in Music Theory and Composition. Where did you study? What were your musical goals or ambitions? And can you discuss any further musical training and also mastering lots of other instruments, such as the bass, the accordion, ukulele, guitar, banjo, drums, and also mandolin?
I attended State University of New York College at Fredonia. They have an accredited school of music there. And when I first went to Fredonia, I actually went with the focus of doing music therapy. I was a music therapy major when I started, and did spend a good deal of time studying that. And but I eventually transferred to study music composition, and I still have a great deal of respect for the profession of music therapy. You know, I'm sure that I'm still using it today, things that I've learned in how I teach some of my students. But I really felt like as a musician, I felt pulled more towards really studying music per se, and that's how I gravitated to music theory and music composition. And I had a wonderful mentor there, Dr. Donald Bolin, who I'm still very close with, who really took me under his wing. And, you know, because I didn't really fit into a nice mold at Fredonia. It's a conservatory. And so here I am with kind of a jack of all trades. You know, here I play, you know, a whole mess of instruments. And, you know, to distill that into studying composition really was the way to go. And so I really got a lot out of studying with him. And I really feel like I began to learn about music when I studied composition. It really was the thing that made everything else click.
I want to stay on the theme of your tenure at music college and turn to a significant part of your life, and that was meeting your future husband, Thomas Milotto. Can you recall your first meeting with Tom, and what do you think connected you both on a personal and creative level?
Well, I think one of the first times I remember seeing my husband to be, we were both singing in the big festival chorus doing Carl Orff's Carmina Burana. And I was in the alto section and he was in the tenor section. And I remember looking up at him when the tenors had a particular solo part to do. And I didn't know him at the time, but I remember thinking I was really taken with how intensely he was singing and how dedicated he was to doing, like focusing on that part. And I thought, that's somebody who cares about music. That's somebody who cares about what they're doing. And you know, it sounds trite, but that made an impression on me. And then I think we might have met, like actually met in the dining hall at one point, and then, you know, we became friends. We were friends for several years before we dated. So, and we've collaborated over the years. We have a really great project studio. He's a fantastic engineer, and he has a doctorate in classical guitar performance from SUNY Stony Brook, plays really terrific electric guitar. And so not only has he engineered and co-produced and co-arranged all of my full-length albums, when I write for clients, some of my clients through my licensing company, sometimes they hire us to actually write music and not even license a piece of music, but, you know, custom score. We often collaborate on that and do the recordings in-house. So yeah, we've been able to kind of have a very musical life together.
We began our conversation talking about your musical roots and it almost being instilled in you and playing instruments from a very young age and your musical education. I wanted to turn on to your early career as a performer, can you recall your first live performance? Can you remember the venue? And did you perform as part of a band or as a solo musician? And can I also ask you about the local music scene during that early period and what you learned about performing regularly to different audiences?
Well, literally the first live performance I did, which was not for my family, but, like for other people, the public, was probably like playing a nursing home. My mother was a member of a local women's civic organization. And around certain holidays, they would take us kids to the local nursing home to sing for the residents. And that's literally like maybe 5, 6 years old doing that kind of thing. And of course, performing in school, doing concerts in school. And then when I got into high school, playing in bands, whether we were doing a concert in the school auditorium or, playing some of the local bars or restaurants. That's kind of what I was doing at that time. It was very local to that area. And, there was live music around, but I would say most of the performing in during my high school years was at school related functions.
You and Tommy married in 1998, and a year later you finished recording your first full-length album. What were the challenges involved in self-producing a debut album, and how did you go about marketing and releasing the finished work?
Well, it's a while ago. Things were very different even, back then. We really didn't have the social media that we have now. I was probably sending mailings out, approaching radio, writing to radio stations, sending CDs out, writing to newspapers to do press releases. Our studio was very different back then. That first album, I think we recorded with one microphone and the A to D converter in the back of our computer that had a 1 gigabyte hard drive. And we were backing up to these little jazz drives. We didn't even, but everyone was doing that kind of thing back then. So it was really, the beginning of what has become, people just doing the DIY thing and recording in their project studios. And, the gear has just grown by leaps and bounds. So, what we're able to do today is just amazing, compared to the sound quality of that first album. It's what it is. It's I think the songs are good, but if I put that next to what we recorded just a few years ago, there's obviously a difference in the sonic quality, but that's just life. That's how things, progress.
I want to come on to two of your more recent solo recordings called Our Waltz Before I Go and Wonder Wheel. Can you discuss the flavor of those albums and their themes, the musicians you collaborated with, and the reaction to those albums received from the music press, your fan base, and the radio play that they've received?
Well, both of those albums, and even A Brooklyn Night, tend to have a real variety of musical genres on them. And they're basically all my original songs. But as I've said before, I just love so many different styles and genres of music that shows up in my writing. Not so much where, I'm mishmashing genres together to create something brand spanking new that's just, like a bunch of different things. But, as I'm writing, I'll think, well, that lyric sounds like it really should be a country song. And that tune sounds like it should be a folk song. And this is going to be, a garage rock band tune. And this is going to be, and that's how I like to write. That's what I like to listen to. So all of my albums are really you know, they cross multiple genres. And Wonder Wheel I put out shortly after I left Lez Zeppelin. So that's got a couple of good rockers on it. I'll Waltz Before I Go. It has a couple of rockers on it as well, but there's a bit more, I think, more of an acoustic sense to that album. But again, the genres are all over the place. There's like a gypsy jazz tune. There's a kind of an R&B 6/8 tune that almost sounds like it's a girl group from the late 60s. So it's there, you know, it's just what I like. So and I'm hoping, and the response I've gotten from people is they like the variety of what I do. So, you know, as I move forward and, you know, already thinking about what the next album or albums are going to be, they're probably all always going to have that kind of sense about them.
From your own compositions now to another phase in your career, and that was being in a covers group. You went on to become an original member of the world's first all-girl Led Zeppelin tribute band called Lez Zeppelin. What made you decide to join a tribute band? And were you a fan of Zeppelin's music? And can you discuss learning and mastering the songs, your time in the band, and the places you performed, working with legendary producer Eddie Kramer?
At the time that I joined Lez Zeppelin, you know, I always liked the music of Led Zeppelin. I wasn't a huge fan, but I always liked it. And honestly, I was vice president of a licensing and music supervision company at the time. I was working many hours every week. I was starting to work on the Vickie and Nickie Show with my sister, which is this musical comedy act that we do. So I don't know why in the world I decided that I needed to have another project, but I had heard that this guitarist was looking to put this all-girl Zeppelin tribute together, and she was looking for somebody who played bass. And when she found out I played keyboard and mandolin too, she's like, "That's it. There's John Paul Jones." So, it was also supposed to kind of be a side project where, you know, maybe we'd play once a month in New York City, but we got such great feedback right from the get-go that it just picked up this momentum. And within 2 years, you know, we were leaving the state to go play in Chicago and you know, up in Burlington, Vermont, and down at the State Theater in Virginia. And we were getting so busy that by 2005, I left my job because, you know, I just wanted to join the circus and go on the road with the band. So from about 2005 to 2008, and at that time we also, a new singer and new drummer joined the band. And it really kind of came together at that point. And we were just playing, I don't know, we were playing 125 to 150 dates a year. We were playing around the US, Canada, all throughout Europe. We played Japan. You know, it really was a terrific ride. We played a lot of festivals. We played the Download Festival in the UK, which is, you know, traditionally a hard rock festival. We were the first all-girl band and first all-girl first tribute band to play that festival. Same thing with Bonnaroo in the United States. We played Bonnaroo in 2008. We were a headliner. We went on at midnight one night and played for an hour and a half to about 20,000 people. And so, you know, those experiences are just priceless. They were really, really terrific. I loved being in the band, but after, you know, really I was in it for 6 years. It was time to go. It just kind of hit a point where I left, the singer left, and the drummer left. We all left at the same time, and we wanted to leave when we felt we were still on kind of a high point. And also, you know, that whole time, I barely had time for my own music. So it was 6 years of really just doing that. I really couldn't do much of anything else. So it was time to move on. And of course, recording though the album, our debut album with Eddie Kramer was at Electric Lady Studio, which, you know, it was just a wonderful opportunity. And I really enjoyed working with Eddie, and it was a terrific experience.
From one musical experience to another, and I want to bring your sister Laurie into the fold, because she's a singer, a musician like yourself, and the two of you perform on a regular basis. Can you talk about working with your sister and your musical chemistry? And can you also share with us the theatrical musical comedy act you formed called the Vickie and Nickie Show?
Yes. Well, I've been making music with my sister since, you know, we're tots. You know, we were always playing and singing together, and Laurie's a singer and a multi-instrumentalist as well. And she's kind of gravitated to more of, she does play string instruments and keyboard and percussion, but she also plays clarinet and saxophone. And when I left Lez Zeppelin and I did Wonder Wheel, that was around 2010. And I started to kind of get out more and start playing more on my own. And I asked her at that time if she wanted to join me, you know, in doing some gigs. And to this day, you know, if I'm doing a show or we're doing shows, she joins me on those singer-songwriter performances of my material, and, you know, select covers that we do together. And we've played a lot of festivals, and we play regionally around in the United States. But the Vickie and Nickie Show is an idea that she came up with, and she's also a trained actor. She's been acting for years, and we play housewife sisters from Minnesota who are on the road making music. So we've done a lot of different shows to date where they're scripted shows. This isn't just, you know, these are written shows. And we always do a big holiday show. So for the last 2 years, we were doing live streams because of COVID. But this year, we're doing our first in-person show at the Cutting Room in New York City, and that's on December 10th. We might be live streaming that. We're not sure yet. So if we do, I'll give you a heads up about that, and you can share the word about that. But that's a lot of fun, and it's really a very different thing to be on stage as a character as opposed to being on stage as yourself, you know, doing your own songs. So it's a lot of fun.
I wanted to talk now about another string to your bow, and that's being a trained composer, and you produce music for various projects, including film, television, dance, and new media. What do you enjoy most about composing for these mediums? And of the projects you've worked on, do you have any favorites? And if so, why?
You know, I think one of the things I really love is being given a problem where you have to provide a solution. And you have to work in a certain, you have to work with a certain set of parameters, especially if you're doing, well, any of the things that I work on. But like if you say, you know, you've got somebody who needs a 30-second TV commercial for a specific product, and they kind of like music that sounds like this. So you've got to create something that's original, that has a certain flavor to it. It's just problem solving. And it's kind of exciting to me to say, okay, so let me see if I can do that in 60 seconds or 30 seconds. I like writing for film as well. I had a client that I was doing music supervision for a short film. And one of the songs that they wanted to use to end the film was not available. It was a Cat Stevens song, and they just said no. They were not interested in licensing. So one of the things I was going to offer to them is to find a replacement. But then I said to them, I kind of know what you want. Why don't you let me take a crack at writing something? And I wrote a tune that night, and I demoed it the next day, and I sent it to the filmmaker. And he loved it, and they put that in the end of the film, and that ended the film and ran into the end credits. So that's kind of that's one of the bonuses of being a creative person who also works in the business side of the industry, where, you know, they came to me for licensing, but then I ended up creating something for their film. So that's really exciting. A recent project I worked on that I really loved was I was out of town for five weeks in the spring, living in Enfield, New Hampshire, and working at the Shaker Bridge Theater there. My dear friend Susan Hafner, who's an actress and a director, was directing a play called An Iliad, which is a modern day retelling of Homer's Iliad. And that play has a music element where there's one actor on stage, and then there's a muse. And there's a muse who helps him tell the story by giving him music cues. And so she asked if I wanted to work on this. And basically, I went up and I lived in New Hampshire for 5 weeks. And we did 2 weeks of rehearsals and 3 weeks of the show. And I wrote music in a couple of weeks for this. I had some previous work over like January, February of last year to kind of prep for it. But really, most of the music was written in the rehearsals because I had to see what they needed, So we used an old upright piano. I had percussion instruments. I made an entrance with a banjo at one point. So that was really cool to be able to write that and perform it live 4 nights a week. So I really enjoyed working on that.
Lisa, let's talk about the business side of the music industry. You work as a music supervisor and rights clearance specialist with your own company, Hidden Pond Productions. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about those job descriptions entail, and how has that helped you with the business side of being a songwriter and a composer?
Well, let me backtrack a little bit to say that, when I graduated college and I moved to New York City, in order to, pay the rent as I was writing or performing, I decided that I wanted to find a job that was at least related somehow to the music business. And I took a job at a rights clearance company. And so I learned the business from the ground up, all kinds of rights clearance, everything from music to also clearing photographs and film clips and, just anything that's copyrighted or protected, we worked with. And then I went on to become a partner in another company where we focus more on music supervision, helping people find the right music for their productions. And then I left that when I went on to tour with the band. But at that time, some of my clients continued to want to work with me. And I started doing licensing and supervision on my own. And I incorporated my company in 2011. And, as somebody who works in both the business side and the creative side, each one informs the other and each one helps the other. I've had to learn a lot about copyright. I've had to learn also about, what people need to do to protect themselves. I've learned how to read agreements. I've learned how to draft agreements. And I'm in a position now where I actually have songwriters and musicians that are clients of mine because they consult with me on any variety of music business topics, including everything from, how do I become a member of ASCAP or BMI, and how do I update those catalogs? How do I copyright my music? Should I be a member of Sound Exchange? And consulting with people regarding social media. So I'm able to take those things that I've learned in the business and help people who are also in the boat that I'm in, where I'm like a DIY songwriter. So that's been really cool. And I really enjoy helping people in that respect.
We spoke briefly earlier on about the changes to the music industry, which has been particularly driven, the change, by technology. I wanted to ask you how you go about releasing your music and which platforms you use to promote your work. And do you still produce CD copies? And do you currently have an agent or a publishing deal?
The last time that I released an album, which was I'll Waltz Before I Go, I only did 300 CDs. Everything else was digital. I just went, digital release, which proliferated to Spotify, which, like many musicians and songwriters I know, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with. And, will I do CDs the next go round? I don't know. Maybe a short run of 100. Because honestly, it's still nice to have a few things with you when you're at a gig and somebody wants to, you still have a few people that want to buy something like that. But really, it's just, it's kind of, it's going this way in terms of physical product. Yeah.
We've spoken earlier on about some of your solo albums and or your musical endeavors, but of all the albums you've produced, which recordings are you most proud of and why? And how often do you write and compose your own songs? And how does that creative process work for you?
I think I'm always most proud of like the latest thing I've done. I really think we did some wonderful work on I'll Waltz Before I Go. And I'm looking forward to doing more recording and releasing more material in the future. I have a lot of songs that, if I stopped writing today, I would still have enough for like 4 or 5 albums. I would say, you really, and I tell this to young writers too, you really kind of have to set time aside. I used to be very good at that. I think the past couple of years have been challenging because things have shifted about how I'm working and, what you have to put your energy into. But I really feel like it's like anything that you make time for. It's about time management. For me, and also because I came up through music school and I studied composition. And, sometimes I've got a client who says, I need something in 3 days. I can't just sit around and wait for the lightning bolt of inspiration to hit. Now, yes, there are those songs that, sometimes you feel like you're just channeling something and it arrives and, it's done and it's great. But I think it's important to also have the skill and the craft to be able to say, okay, well, I have an hour at 4 o'clock today, so I'm going to do some writing, and just do it. Or if it's a half hour or 15 minutes, it's just working that muscle regularly, which I think is important.
I wanted to talk a bit more about the creative process for you. Do you like to explore particular themes in your songs? And do you begin with the lyrics or the music? And do you ever record any rough demos?
It changes. Sometimes a lyric will come first, or a title, or a particular phrase, or sometimes I'll get a riff in my head or a progression that I'm liking. So it can change. And I think it just kind of depends on what might be happening. Sometimes it's even reading something in the news that catches your eye. Yeah.
Lisa, shortly we move on to that time where we ask all your take guests the same quick fire questions to find out things we maybe not revealed during the course of our discussion this evening. But before I do so, I want to move away from music.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of music, what are your interests and hobbies? And do you have any long-term musical plans or goals? Or would you like to work in any creative spheres away from the music industry?
I really enjoy visual art. If there's anything that I do that's not musical, that's creative, it's drawing and painting. And in terms of, I find that very relaxing. In terms of you know, what I may want to do in the future. I want to continue to release more of my music, doing audio releases. I'm also really concentrating also more on getting my music down in writing. So notating and making my music available for sale as sheet music, because I'm trying to think, you know, down the road, you know, what's my legacy? I want to be able to leave something so that other people can play or sing my material when I'm not here anymore. And it's written out and they can, you know, read that music. So that's kind of an ongoing process, and it's kind of chipping away at that on a regular basis.
Lisa, it's that time. We ask all your take guests these same quick fire questions. You don't need to think about these in any depth or in any detail, but just to find out things that maybe we didn't know about them. You ready for this? Start off with number one. What would you say is your favorite pastime?
Well, when I'm not making music, what I really, really enjoy doing is being outside, taking a walk or hiking, or in particular, being at the seashore. I love the ocean. I love swimming in the ocean. I really feel at home on a beach.
We move to cinema now, an area that we touched a little bit in terms of film composition, but if you had to pick your favorite film, what would it be and why?
You know, it's really hard because I'm a lover of film, especially old films, black and white, old films. You know, I know it's sappy, but I just love It's a Wonderful Life. And I think I tend to like movies that are in that vein, where you know, there's some hope in the film. There's some humor. There's like even Moonstruck. I love Moonstruck. Hilarious movie with a lot of heart. I love the film Big Night, which is an indie film that Stanley Tucci, the actor Stanley Tucci, directed and wrote. That's a great film. Again, a lot of heart. So yeah.
From film now, favorite films, to a favorite novelist, who would you choose?
I think my most recent favorite novelist is George Saunders, who wrote Lincoln in the Bardo, which is a terrific book. It's so good, I want to read it again. But I also have a real love of English period mysteries, like, you know, the kind of cozy mysteries like Anne Perry and Charles Todd mysteries. I really like anything that's historical in that respect.
You've done so many things in music, which we've established today. But if you could have chosen a different profession, which wasn't musical, what would it have been?
It might have been visual art, or very possibly medicine. I was really interested in maybe being a doctor when I was a kid, a pediatrician or a veterinarian. I really love animals, so I could easily see myself as having gone in that direction.
Inspirations in life, we have many, but who would you cite as the greatest inspiration in yours?
I would say my mom. My mom, she passed away in 2015. And she had a chronic illness all her life, but she was she always looked terrific. She was always put together. She really took care of herself. And, you know, it was a real challenge for her to get through some, you know, many days in her life, but she did. And she, to this day, remains probably my greatest inspiration.
From your mum as your greatest inspiration, we now move on to newspapers, the press. Do you read a newspaper? And what is your newspaper of choice?
Newspaper of choice is the New York Times. Yeah, I have a subscription, and I used to read the paper version, but I'm reading the online version these days.
Do you miss not being able to have that physical?
I do, honestly. I'm somebody who still reads books. I don't have a Kindle. I really like the tactile thing. And I used to love getting the Sunday news where it was just, it was this thick, right? But it's easier for me to just read it online these days.
And interestingly, we've spoken a little bit about physical media. Do you still play sort of vinyl records, CDs? Is that kind of still a preference for you to
Yes,
be able to read the linear notes and look at the cover and the photography?
Yep, absolutely. We actually have two turntables in our house, one in the front of the house, one in the back of the house. So yeah, we still play vinyl. We still have CDs. Mm-hmm.
We move on to food. Do you enjoy cooking? But what would you say is your favorite food?
Well, I do love to cook. And I'm Italian on both sides, so I just can't help myself. If just a bowl of pasta with some really good, tomato sauce if that was the last thing I ever ate on this planet, I'd be happy.
We now move on to cultural icons. We ask all our guests to choose their favorite cultural icon. It could be a significant figure from history, could be somebody in music, somebody who maybe has changed the world or the way we see things. Who would you choose as your favorite cultural figure?
Oh, goodness. It might sound crazy, but I think Judy Garland. Judy Garland, it's one of the movies, talking about movies that I love, The Wizard of Oz. And seeing that film at such a young age and hearing her at such a young age, and then learning about her and learning more about her films. And, it's somebody who had such a terrific gift as an actor, as a singer, as a dancer, and really had to struggle through her life. I think she's just left such a breadth of work. I really, as kind of like a pop culture icon, I think she's really it for me.
And Judy Garland is your favorite cultural icon. We now come on to curse words. What would you say is your favorite curse word and why?
It easily fuck. Definitely a favorite because you can just use it in so many different ways. You can use it as a noun, a verb, adjective, adverb. It just kind of, it's a fricative, it's got that K on it, and it just suits my purposes.
It's always a popular choice.
It is. I'm sure it is.
You've spoken about travel with your music for touring, being in the Led Zeppelin covers group and seeing many places in the world. But what would you say is your favorite place or holiday destination?
I think a favorite place of mine is Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And in particular, Provincetown, which is the very, very tip of the Cape. It's just, it's a beautiful place, beautiful beaches, lots of great biking trails, and a very diverse population of people. And I really love that about Provincetown.
Interestingly, if you could live somewhere outside of the US, where would you go maybe?
I think if I could live anywhere outside of the US, I might want to live in Italy for a time. Yeah.
I had a feeling you might choose
Yeah,
Italy.
I think so.
Any town, place, or maybe a major Italian city?
I've been to Venice, Rome, Milan, Florence. Most of my family's from southern Italy, so it might be interesting to get a little farther down the boot at some point. Yeah.
The question you never want to ask any musician, particularly one that has so many influences and has played so many different styles and forms of music, but who is your favorite music artist, and what would you say is your favorite album?
That's really hard. Honestly, I think one of my favorite artists is a group called the Roaches, and there were three sisters, and the first time that I heard their material, I was just like, whoa. And it's kind of like the whole sibling thing, the harmony, and I sing with my sister, so we were both very into them when I was in high school. And the interesting thing about that, though, is I've recently worked with Terry Roach of the Roaches and produced her most recent album for her. I was a co-producer on the album. My husband Tom did all the audio restoration and mastering of this album, and it's actually some live recordings of her and her sister Maggie from years ago that resurfaced, and we kind of packaged them and put them together and released them as an album recently. So it's kind of it's kind of cool to kind of have a music idol and inspiration from high school and come full circle and actually get to work with them. That's really been terrific.
Always difficult to pick a favorite album, but would you say there's one in your life that's been timeless and brings back particular memories from a certain period in your life?
I would have to say the Roaches album, The Roaches, their debut album from 1979, is really seminal in even just affecting my own writing. Yeah, I would have to say that one.
It's interesting you picked them, because I spoke to a guest recently, also from New York, who actually had gone to music college with one of them, and that was the keyboard player Tommy Mandel.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, played with many groups, played with Bryan
Yeah.
Adams for years.
Right.
Played with Dire Straits and toured with them in Europe and here in the UK. So that was interesting that name came up.
Yeah.
The final two, Lisa, what would you say is your greatest achievement to date?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm most proud about is that I've been able to work for myself since 2005, that I've not been working for somebody else or somebody else's company and helping somebody else fulfill their dream. That I've managed, and it's not easy. It's tough financially and emotionally and mentally, but it still feels so good to be able to say that whatever I'm doing is, it's for my company, it's for my music. And so I'm very proud of that. And, knock on wood, I can continue to do that for a long time.
And then finally, Lisa Brigantino, how do you wish to be remembered?
Well, I would like to be remembered as a kind person in this business, which is cutthroat, who had integrity and kept their integrity with what they were doing and stayed true to their calling. So, music is a calling, for me anyway. I knew I was going to be involved in it somehow, even as a kid. And I've just followed that path, and I've continued to make music and be involved in music in many different ways. And I hope I can continue to do that for many years.
You carried on following that path, and I hope you continue to perform, compose, and do all the different things you do musically. Thank you for sharing your perspective on your life, your musical journey with me today for your take. And I wish you all the very best with all your endeavors. And thank you kindly for your time.
Thank you very much, James. It was great talking to you.
Lastly, will we be able to see you on these sides of the shore at some point? And also, where can we find out and listen to more of your music, find out more about all your musical history? Can you tell us that as well, please?
Sure. Well, there's nothing I would like better than to come over to your side of the pond. That's for sure. I would love to come over and do some music. I can be found easily at my website, lisabrigantino.com. Also Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I am not on Twitter any longer. I got rid of that. And YouTube, of course, but all of the links are at lisabrigantino.com. You can easily find my social media links there. There are links to my music, bio, press, photos, all kinds of good stuff.
And interestingly, you performed in England. When was the last time you performed here, and can you recall where that was?
The last time I performed in England was in 2008, I believe. And that was in London, and that was with Lez Zeppelin. Oh, gosh, I can't remember the club name. I can't remember it, but yeah. Last time was with Lez Zeppelin.
Thank you. Thank you once again for your time. And as I said earlier, I wish you all the very best with everything. And thank you again for sharing your story.
Thank you very much, James. It was a pleasure talking with you.